Hey everyone, welcome to The Loft and I hope you've had a good week. So it's been roughly a year since I've started investing using a dividend strategy in my current ISA, and I thought now might be a good time to do a yearly review and kind of look at what's happened with my portfolio over the last year and what my main holdings are and things like that. So as always, investing does have risks and does have dangers. So just because I hold a particular stock doesn't mean that you guys should hold a stock. But I know you guys are smarter than that and you wouldn't just buy a stock because someone on YouTube has it or says something good about it. So as always, do your own research, but I wanted to briefly touch on it just to see if there's anything useful in there and what we can learn from my portfolio over the last year. So as mentioned, I am trying to use a dividend investing strategy, and the main reason for this is because I can then use money from the dividends to buy more stocks, which essentially gives me bonus capital without me needing to sell out of a company to reclaim some of that money. I am aiming to invest on average between £100 to £200 per month. Sometimes I'm a little bit under that, but I tend to make it up the following month. But that's the rough average that I look for. And on average, I try to either dollar cost average into the particular companies that I hold, or I will buy companies that I think are particularly undervalued at the time. So let's take a look and see what's happened with my portfolio over the last year. So a brief bit of history on how the portfolio actually started. The portfolio came to life on the 13th of April 2020, which is when I made my first purchases. And that was mainly because I could start an ISA after the 6th of April when the ISA renewal is available. And also because briefly before that, I'd started a new job that actually allowed me to save a decent amount of money as I was getting paid more from that compared to my previous job. So because I had more investable cash, I started putting it all into the ISA in the stocks and shares, more so than I was before, where I was only able to put the odd penny and pound in every so often. So because of that, I have over the last 12 months on my ISA alone, transferred and made transactions to the count of 310 total transactions, most of which were purchases. And I have invested my own money into the current portfolio to the tune of £2,375. And I have £70 left to buy stocks with over the next week or so that I haven't included in that total value because I currently haven't bought any stocks with them. Currently, as of the time of recording of this video, my portfolio is sitting around £2,821. So overall, I'm up about £400 to £450 above what I'd initially invested. And obviously that includes the dividends that have been reinvested back into the portfolio. As I mentioned, the idea of this portfolio is to grow dividends, which I can then use to pay back into the portfolio, reinvest it into companies and get more dividends. Potentially and hopefully at one point my monthly dividend payout will be more than the actual amount that I'm able to invest monthly, at which point I will see rapid growth in the portfolio. Obviously that will be a little bit down the line, but it is a nice thing to target and to look forward to over the next 2 to 3 years. I will be looking at first the top 10 companies in my portfolio and how they're broken down. And if you're interested in the rest of the breakdown of my portfolio, I will have essentially a scrolling list here that will break down every single percentage of every company that I hold. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check that while I'm talking about my top 10 companies. So working in a descending fashion through the top 10 companies in my portfolio, the first one on the list in regards to value in proportion to the rest of the portfolio is Main Street Capital, who make up around 5.5% of the portfolio itself, which is 5 shares in total of the company. Main Street Capital pay a monthly dividend of around 12p per month, and I am expected from my position to get roughly 60p per month in my portfolio. Obviously that can fluctuate a little bit with FX and everything like that. So bear that in mind with all of the US companies that I'm looking at. The second one on the list is actually a REIT, which is Realty Income Corp. And they take up around 5.3% of my portfolio with a total of 3 shares. Realty Income Corp are also a monthly payer and they pay out around 14p per share. So that's netting me about 43p per month. In third place, we have PPL, who make up around 5.3% of my portfolio, and my position there is made of 7 shares. PPL do pay out a dividend per share of around 25p, and they pay it on a quarterly basis. So on average, I net around £1.80 every single quarter, and they tend to pay out in January, April, July, and October. Following PPL, we do have the very well-known company Coca-Cola, and they make up around 4.9% of my portfolio. Coca-Cola do pay a quarterly dividend as well of around 26p, and I currently hold 3.5 shares of the company. So that means I'm expected to make around 90p every quarter, and they pay around April, July, October, and December. In fifth place, we do have our first UK-based company, which is Games Workshop. And overall, Games Workshop make up around 4.6% of my portfolio, and I hold 1.2 shares. Games Workshop tend to pay their dividends on a quarterly basis, not including any special dividends that they pay. But the actual month that they pay out and the amount they pay out does tend to vary depending on how their business is going. On average, I manage to get around 30p per share each quarter. So overall, not too bad, but I can't actually give you a breakdown of what months they pay their dividends. Following that, we have yet another REIT, this one being Store Capital, who make up 4.6% of my portfolio, and I hold 5 shares of the company. They also pay a quarterly dividend, and they pay around 20p per share, and they pay these out in January, April, July, and October. And overall, I'm looking to net around £1 per quarter for every time they pay their dividends. Next, we have our second UK company in the top 10, and this one is GSK, and currently I hold 9 shares of the company, and this makes up 4.3% of my portfolio. GSK currently pay a dividend of around 18p per share, which means that I'm netting roughly £1.70 every time they pay a dividend, which they pay on a quarterly basis, and generally this is paid in January, April, July, and October. Though it is worth highlighting that GSK are doing some business changes at some point in the near future, so this dividend will probably be cut as they go through these changes. They have said that it is likely to go down. I just don't have an exact figure at this precise moment in time, so that will be a slight reduction in future. Then moving over, we have the 8th position, which is yet another REIT. This one is Stag Industrials, and they take up a total 3.7% of the portfolio, with me having a position of 4 shares in the company. They also pay out monthly, and they pay out a figure of 7 pence roughly per month, giving me a total of 30p per month in dividend payments from that company. Now on to the last 2 companies in the top 10. In position number 9, we have Pepsi, who take up roughly 3.7% of my portfolio as well. Though for them I only have 1 share, and they pay out a total dividend of 63p per share, and they pay this generally in January, March, June, and September. And clearly, as I hold 1 share for the company, I get the 1 share dividend of 63p and no more. And then the final company in the portfolio top 10 is a relatively new one that I've been buying more and more of recently, and this one is AT&T, and they now take up 3.2% of my portfolio with a total of 4 shares. And they tend to pay a dividend out in February, May, August, and November, with a dividend payment of around 30p per share. So I'm hoping to net around £1.20 each quarter from them. The rest of the portfolio is spread across 50 companies and a total of 98 shares spread across all of those companies. And the ratio in relation to my company portfolio takes a fluctuation between 0.06 at the low end up to 3.1% at the high end. And that's just before we hit the top 10 positions that we've just gone over. So if we look at the top 10 positions of my portfolio and break them down by sector, we can see that I am more heavily in real estate in my top 10, and that my top 10 stocks take up around 45% of my portfolio. Now, I think it might be worth looking in and jumping over to the full diversification of my portfolio. And what I want to highlight here is I do have target weightings for each sector, though these are more guidelines than actual rules. So I'm not particularly fussed if I'm above or below them, but it's just a baseline guide that I can use when I'm picking stocks if I feel that I am underweight in one particular area. So looking at the overall sector diversification of my portfolio, we can see that my top sector in the portfolio is consumer staples with 18.9%, followed closely by real estate with 17.1%, and then we have the financial sector with 13.2%. Following this, we have healthcare, consumer discretion, tech, communication, utilities, energy, and then with the smallest slice of the pie, we have industrials with 3%. All of these sectors are relatively okay, the way that I'm happy with them, though some of them are slightly underweight, and the ones that are below target are communications, consumer discretions, and industrials. Now, one bit that I did want to touch on before we go over to the actual dividend growth and how that's been performing over the year is the actual main contributors to my dividends in who has been paying me the most money. And the main reason for this is I know that the majority of these companies are going to be the ones that I've held for the longest time, but I do also think that it's good to know who has paid me the most amount of money, and if they cut their dividend, how much that is going to be affected. So if we jump into this list, the number one company that has paid me the most in the form of dividends is Main Street Capital, and they've paid out just around £5 over the last year. And then in second, we have Realty Income with a payment of around £3.46 in the last year. And then finally, we have Coca-Cola, who has sent across £2.54 in the life of the portfolio since I've owned that particular stock. So out of that, that is the top 3 companies that have paid me out of all of my dividends. If you are interested in what other companies have paid large amounts of dividends and the particular breakdown of what companies have paid me dividends over the last year, that will be streaming here. So feel free to check that quickly, and I will move on to the overall chart of the dividend payments and what has been happening with dividends over the last year. On the note of dividends, we can look at this chart and we can see that roughly I've made around £45 in dividends back across the entire year, and that we can see that my first dividend payment came in on May 2020, which was a value of 25p, and then it has gone up to the latest value, which was last month's dividends, of a value of £10.66 for April 2021. And I'm really chuffed about this. This is something that I'm really happy about, because one of my targets for my dividends was to hit £10 in a particular month, which we have done last month, so I'm really happy about this. My next goal is to either hit 3 consecutive months of at least £10, because most of my companies pay on a quarterly basis. In theory, that means that if I can manage a full quarter with at least £10 every month, that will be my new baseline, which I can then work from. And my next actual target in returns of how much money I can get from my dividends is now going to be £15 in a single month. So hopefully it won't be too long until I can get that money in the form of dividends up to £15. So again, this can slightly be awkward to work out, mainly because Trading 212 have some delays on when they actually pay dividends into an account. But for next month, I'm hoping to receive around £10 to £12 in dividends. So I thought I'd also share just some quick facts and some overall statistics of my portfolio. And that is that overall, my portfolio has returned around 17% on invested cash. And that's obviously included any of the dividends that I have reinvested back into the company. It also has an average beta of 1.2, so slightly more active and more fluctuations than the average market, but I'm not particularly fussed with that. And the dividend yield on cost is around 3.8%. So overall, I'm happy with the performance of my portfolio. I think 17% is relatively good, not too shabby, and definitely a lot better than I could get in any savings account with any of the banks that I have access to here. So let's see what happens in the future. Let's see if I can keep this up, or if potentially there's going to be a market crash and I've wasted my entire year and I'm going to lose all my money. I hope that's not going to happen, but we'll see what happens over the next year. And as always, if you want to see what's happening on a weekly basis and what's changing on my portfolio week to week, I would suggest bookmarking this playlist here, or feel free to check it out now. And until next time, remember to invest, save, and subscribe.